What's going on, guys? So once in a while I like to do clones, HTML, CSS clones of certain websites or web pages. We did Netflix, we did a CVS mobile app, we've done Pluralsight. So now we're going to do the Microsoft.com homepage, which was actually requested. And we're going to do pretty much everything except this slideshow here. We're just going to have a static image, but we're going to use CSS grid for the cards and cards down here. We're going to use flexbox. We're going to make it responsive. So this is the actual site, and then this is what we'll be building. Okay, so this is the exact page that we'll be building, and you can see it's very, very similar. Some of the images have changed since I actually built the project, but it is fully responsive, so we'll be dealing with media queries. We'll have a little bit of JavaScript because once we get down to a certain size, we're going to make this menu go away, and then we have this button here that we click to open the menu on the side. Okay, also down here you can see now there's only two grid columns instead of 4. Same thing here. If I keep making it smaller and go down to 500 pixels, now it's all stacked and nice and neat. Menu still works and looks good. Okay, so it's fully responsive. Again, we'll be dealing with Flexbox, we'll be dealing with the grid. So lots of modern CSS as well as HTML5. So let's get started. All right, so the only files that we need to get started are index.html, style.css, and then we need all the images. You can see I have an IMG folder here with all the card images. We have card 1 through card 8. We have the Microsoft logo, social media icons, the showcase image. So what I'm going to do is put a link in the description for you to download this, I guess, this boilerplate with the 2 files and all the images, just in case you want to follow along, which I would recommend. Okay, so I'm also going to keep the final project open so we can reference it if we need to. So let's jump into index.html and just create a boilerplate with Emmet. So exclamation enter, and just tab down to the title here, and let's say Microsoft official homepage, and we want to link in our style sheet, so we'll add a link tag to style CSS. And as far as the JavaScript, there will be just a tiny bit, just a couple lines, so that we can click the menu button and have the menu slide open on smaller screens. So we're just going to put that right in the HTML, just add a script tag when the time comes. All right, so let's create a container class. So I'm going to be using Emmet throughout this video. So we'll say .container enter, which will give us a class of container. And inside here we want our nav bar. I'm just going to put a comment here, and let's use an HTML5 nav tag, and let's give it a class of main-nav. Okay, and then in here we're going to have a few things. We're going to have the logo, the main menu, and then the right menu. And the right menu is this right here, just these 2 icons, which don't actually do anything, but we're going to put them there anyway. So let's start off with the logo. So we have our image, and I'm going to give it a class of logo, and the source is going to be in the image folder, and it's logo PNG, and for the alt we'll just say Microsoft. And then right under that, let's put a UL, an unordered list, with a class of main menu, and we're going to have some list items here with a link that isn't going to go anywhere, so I'll just put a number sign. And then I'm just going to copy this down. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the first one is going to be Office. Second one, Windows, Surface, Xbox, deals, and support. Alright, so that's our main menu, and then right under that we're going to have the other menu, which I'm going to call right menu. Now we are going to be using Font Awesome icons, so I'm just going to jump back into Chrome and search for font. Let's say Font Awesome 5 CDN, or you can just go to fontawesome.com, but if you do that, you do have to sign up and log in and create what's called a kit. If we do this, we can just choose either the JavaScript, or I'm just going to grab the CSS. So this right here, this all.min, I'm going to just copy the link tag and put that right above where we brought in our style CSS. And then down in the right menu here, we're going to have a list item, and inside here we'll have an A tag, and inside that we'll have an I tag with an icon. So let's do a class of FAS, font awesome, and then FA-search. And then what we'll do is just copy this list item down, and then this one is going to be FA-shopping-cart. So I want to check this out. So you can either open the HTML file on your file system, or you can use the live server extension, which is what I'm doing. So I'm going to say open with live server. And there we go. So we can see the logo, we have all of our links, and we have our two icons. So before we add any more HTML, let's go ahead and start to style this. We'll add our base styles for the body and stuff like that, and style the nav bar. All right, so let's jump in, and I'm not going to do the responsive navigation until the end, the little hamburger menu and all that stuff. So in our style CSS, let's say for everything we want to set the box sizing to border box so that the padding doesn't affect the width or anything like that. And then we want to set the margin to 0 and the padding to 0. So we're basically just adding a reset on every element. And then for the body, we'll set a font family. And we're going to use this what is it? Seago, I don't know how to pronounce it. Seago UI, Tahoma, Geneva, Verdana, Sans Serif. So that's the font family I'm using. And then background is going to be white. And let's set the color of the text to black. So I'm using hexadecimal here. And then we'll set the font size to 15 pixels. And let's set the line height to, we'll do 1.5 for the line height. All right, and then we'll just do some base styles, like for links. Let's make the color of the links a little lighter than the black, which I'm going to use 2.6 3 times. Okay, and then we want to take away any underlines, so text decoration, we'll set that to none. Okay, so if we look at that so far, it should look like this. And then for any unordered lists, I'm going to take away the bullets, so we'll set list to style to none. Okay, and then we have a container class which wraps around everything. So we want that to take up almost the whole screen, so we'll do width 90%. But we do want to set a max width. We don't want it to pass a certain width. So the max width I'm going to set to 1100 pixels. And let's set the margin auto, which will give it even margin on all sides, which will put it in the middle. Okay, so if we take a look, you can see that it'll take up 90% of the screen up until 1100 pixels, which is the max, and that's where it'll stop. Okay, so let's jump back in here, and let's start to style the navigation. So I'm going to put a comment here, just say nav. So we have a class of main nav. And for the navigation, I usually like to use flex for this just to line it up nicely. So let's set this to display flex. And what this will do is it'll set all the inner items to flex items and align them in a horizontal row. And if we look at main nav, inside we have 3 items: the image, the UL, this UL, and this UL. So it's just going to basically set all of those to flex items. And then we can use properties like align items, and we want to center everything. Okay, I'm just going to see what that does for us. So if we save that, now you can see everything is lined up horizontally. Not the list items, because remember, those are in the UL. Those aren't directly in the main nav class. All right, we'll work on those after. But let's set some other things here. So the main nav, I'm going to set a height of 60 pixels. And let's set a little bit of padding. So we'll do 20 pixels on the top and bottom. So 20 and then 0 on the left and right. And then the font size, I'm going to set a little smaller. We'll do 13 pixels. Okay, so if we take a look at that, you know what, let's actually, we'll do this. Should be able to fit both of these. Okay. Now before we do anything else, I want to handle the unordered list here. I want this to be a flexbox as well, because everything within it should be a row, should be aligned horizontal. So let's take the main nav UL and let's also display that to flex, which will set all the list items to be in a horizontal row. All right, and then let's see. For the main nav, which is displayed flex, see all the space over here? We basically want to distribute that in between the flex items. So to do that, we use justify content, and we have a value called space between. So if I save that, it's just going to put all the equal number of space in between. Now the main menu I want to be pushed over here next to the logo. So what we can do is set the main, let's say main nav, and then take the UL with the class of main menu, and let's set that to flex 1. And then that will push over there, but it's too close to the logo, so let's also add a margin left of 20 pixels and push that over. Okay, and then the logo is too big right now. If we look at the, this page here, it's much smaller. And by the way, my resolution on my machine is this is a 5K screen, so this might look a little smaller on my screen than it looks on yours. So let's deal with the logo. I'm going to go right here and say main nav. There's a class of logo, and I'm going to set the width of that to 110 pixels, which will make it much smaller. All right, and then for this, for the list items here, actually I didn't put a link. Yeah, I did put a link. There it is. For the list items here, we want to separate those. So let's go right here and say main nav UL LI and set the padding to 0 top and bottom, and then 10 pixels on the left and right, which is going to separate those out from each other. Okay, and then when I hover over these, I want to have a little underline effect. So let's go right here and take the main nav UL LI A, and let's add a hover. So for the hover state of the link, I'm going to add a border bottom, and that's going to be 2 pixels solid, and let's do our 2.6 3 times. So now if I go and I hover over, we get this underline. I do want to push the underline down a little bit. So on the link, let's just grab this and say on the link, we want to set padding bottom to 2 pixels. So that way the line is pushed down a little more. Okay, so I think that we should be all set for now. I mean, we will make it responsive. We'll add the hamburger menu, because right now you can see on small screens it just goes off the page, which obviously we don't want. But for now, this is good. So let's go back to our HTML. And what we want to work on next is this part here, which is the showcase. So in our HTML, we'll go down under the nav. Let's put a comment here, say showcase. And we're going to use a header, HTML5 header tag. Give it a class of showcase. And then in here, let's have an H2. And we'll say surface deals. And then a paragraph. And I'm just going to paste this text in. Of course, you can copy it, or you can copy it from, I should have the code in the description, probably a code pen. But we'll just put that text in, and then we want a button that says shop now, or a link. So let's put an A tag here with a class of BTN. So we'll style it as a button. It's not actually going to go anywhere. And then we'll have some text that'll say shop now, and then I just want to have a chevron icon. So we'll put an I tag, FAS, FA-chevron -right. Okay, so if we save that, that's what it's going to look like, which looks like crap, so let's go ahead and style it. So in our CSS, we'll go down, let's style the button first. So BTN is basically a utility class that we can use anywhere. So we'll style that first. And for that, we want to make sure that we have a cursor that is a pointer when we hover over it. And we want to display it as an inline block. And I'm going to set the border to 0. I'm going to bold the font. So font weight is going to be bold. And we want to add some padding. So we'll do 10 pixels top and bottom, 20 pixels left and right. We can see what that looks like so far. We want to add a dark background. So the background, we're going to use 2.6 3 times, and then make the color of the text white. And let's set the font size to 15 pixels. Okay, so there's our button style. Now when we hover over it, I want it to have some kind of effect, so I'm just going to lighten the opacity a little bit. So we'll say for the class button, in its hover state, we're going to set the opacity to 0.9. So just lighten it just slightly so we get that little effect. All right, so that's that. Now we're going to go ahead and do the showcase. So we'll say showcase. So we have a class of showcase. And we want this showcase to have a width of 100% of its container, which is the actual container class. So it should just reach 100%. And then we're going to set a height of 400 pixels for this. Now the background is going to be an image, so we want to set that to URL. And the image we want is going to be in the image folder, and it's called showcase.jpg. Now I have some background properties. We could either add them in separate properties or just add them here. I'm going to add them here, so we'll say no repeat. Okay, we don't want it to repeat. We want to position it center, and we want it to cover that area. So let's save that, and now we have our background image. Now for the items inside, let's display them as flex items. And if I do that, right away it's going to align them into a horizontal row, which I don't want. I want them to be in a column, which is vertical. So let's set the flex direction to column. As soon as I do that, it goes back to going vertical. Now I want to align everything to the center, so we want to use align items center. And let's also set, let's save that. And then I just want to make sure the text is also going to be aligned to the center. So we'll add that as well. I want this to be aligned not in the center because it'll still be kind of within this image here. I want it to be down here. So we're going to use justify content, and we're going to set it to flex end. Okay, we have flex start, which is where it is now, and then flex end. If I save that, it pushes it down to the very bottom. However, that's too low, so I'm going to also add here, let's do padding bottom for the showcase. Set that to 50 pixels. And we also want a margin for things under it, so I'm going to set a margin bottom to 20 pixels. Okay, so that'll push that up a little bit. And then I think that we should be all set for the showcase itself. Now these are kind of squished together, so let's actually take the showcase H2 and the paragraph. Okay, so we're styling both of these, showcase paragraph. And for both of these, I just want to add a margin to the bottom of 10 pixels. And that'll just kind of separate things out. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Actually, the button, though, let's add a little more space here. So I'm going to grab the showcase and then the button inside the showcase. And let's set margin top to 20 pixels. Okay. So now we're going to start to work on the cards, which are these right here, which by default, there's going to be 4. Okay, but then we're going to add media queries, so when we get to 700, there's 2, and 500, there's 1. So we're going to actually use the grid for this here. But, of course, we need to do the HTML first. So let's jump back into our index HTML. Oops. And then we'll go under our showcase, which is the header right here. And I'm just going to make this a little bigger. All right. So we're actually going to have two cards sections. So I'll put a comment here and say home cards 1. And let's use a section, HTML5 section tag here, and give it a class of home cards. And inside here, we're going to have a div, which is going to be each grid. This is going to be set to grid, display grid, and then each div will be a grid item. And in each grid item, we'll have an image, which is going to be, let's say, image/card1 JPEG. I'll just leave the alt blank. And then let's do an H3. And we're going to say new Surface Pro 7, and then a paragraph. So I'm just going to grab the text. Again, I'll have the code in the description, so if you want to just copy the text, you can do that. And then under the paragraph, the last thing we want inside each grid item in each div is a link. So let's put a link here that just goes nowhere and say learn more. And then we'll have a chevron right icon. So FAS, FA-chevron-right. All right, so if I save that, this is what it's going to look like. Now we have, what, 3 more cards, because there's going to be 4 in a row. So I'm actually going to paste these in because it's the same thing, it's just different content. So let me just grab these 3 divs. And again, if you want to grab it from the code, you can. So we have card 1 that we just did, and then we have another div with card 2. Okay, so we have different text as well, just to make it look real. And then another div here, card 3, and then we have our last one. So if I save this, we just have 3 divs on top of each other. So let's jump into our CSS, and we want to use the grid here to style this. Okay, so let's see. Let's put a comment. We'll say home cards. And I can make this smaller. Okay, so home cards. Let's give a class of home-cards. And to use the grid, we want to set this to display grid, not grud, grid. If I do that, nothing happens because we have to let it know what columns or rows or whatever we're doing. So we're going to use grid template columns. And with this, we could set each one to like we could do, I don't know, 50 pixels, 50 pixels. If I did that, it'll give us two columns that are 50 pixels wide, which is obviously not what we want. If we wanted 4, we would just do 50 pixels, 50 pixels. That'll give us 4 that are 50 pixels wide. Now, I'm going to use something called a fractional, or a fraction, an FR unit, which are basically just slices of the grid container. So, for instance, if I do 1 FR, if I save that, that's going to put each one in one column. If we do 2 of these 1 FRs, then we get 2 columns. If we do 3, then we get 3. If we do 1 FR, 4, we get 4, which is what we want. Now, instead of doing it like this, we have a function called repeat we can use, and we can say repeat 4 times 1 FR. And we get the same result. Now, the reason that it's kind of going off the page here is because of the images. Images are always going to go out of their container unless we set the width to be restricted, to be 100% of the container. So let's say home cards image, and we want to make sure that we set the width of these images to 100% of the container. That way they don't go outside of that column, that grid column. Now, I don't want these to be right squished up against each other, so we're going to use a property called grid gap. So with the grid system, we don't even have to use margin to separate out the actual items. We can use grid gap, and we're going to set that to 20 pixels and save, and now you can see we have some space in there. So the grid gap is 20 pixels, and we also have 20 pixels margin bottom on the showcase, so these are even, the spacing here. And then the images, I also want some space underneath, so let's also add a margin bottom there of 20 pixels. Push that text down a little bit. And then the H3, I also want some spacing, so we'll say home cards H3, and let's just do 5 pixels for the margin bottom there. And then these here, these links, we want to handle those. So let's say home cards A, and I want to display these as an inline block because they're displayed inline by default. And we want to be able to add padding top 10 pixels, and let's set the color to a hexadecimal value of 0067B8, which is a bluish color. And then we're going to set, I want them to be uppercase, so we'll set text transform to uppercase. And let's see, the last thing we're going to do here is just set them to be bold, so we'll set the font weight to bold, like that. Okay, and it's kind of squishy. It looks better if you stretch it out like that. Once we hit like 700 pixels, we're going to change this, switch some things up so that, for instance, these are in, there's only 2 columns and so on. But we'll do that after. We'll do the media queries after. So let's see, when I hover over one of these links here, I want the chevron to kind of push out a little bit. So what we'll do is take the home cards and say when we hover over the link, when the link is in the hover state, then we want to take the icon and we want to just add a margin left to it of 10 pixels. Okay, so that way when I hover over, you can see it just kind of pushes out a little bit. So that takes care of the first set of home cards. Now we want the Xbox area, which is this. So let's add that HTML. I'm just going to make this a little bigger for now. So we'll go, let's see, we have our section, so we want to go under this section, and then we'll have our Xbox section. We'll give this a class of Xbox. So in here we're going to have a div with the class of content, because basically we're going to have a background image, and then we have this element with the content inside of it, which is going to have an H2. We'll say Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, and a paragraph, which I'm going to just grab real quick. And then under that we'll have an A tag, and this is going to be our button, so we want our BTN class here. Okay, and then inside here we'll say join now, and again I want to have a chevron icon, so FAS FA dash chevron right. Okay, so if I save that, you can see this is what it looks like here. Now I do want to add some margin to the home cards. I forgot to do that. So in our CSS, right here, home cards, let's say margin bottom, and let's do, I think 40 pixels is what we want. Yeah. Okay, and then that should be it for the Xbox HTML, so we can actually go back to the CSS, and then let's start on that. So I'll make this smaller just so we can see what we're doing here. And let's put a comment here. This is the Xbox styling. So the first thing we want to do is the Xbox class itself. So I'm going to give this a height of 350 pixels, and we want a width of 100%. Okay, and then just set a background image. So we'll say background URL, and the image is going to be image, whoops, we need quotes here, image slash Xbox PNG, and we're going to set some properties here, so no repeat, center slash cover, and save. Okay, so now we have our background image. Now we have to style the content that is within it. So remember, we have a class of content, so Xbox, and then we want the content class inside of that. And I'm just going to set a width of 40% because I don't want it to spread all the way across. So that kind of contains it to the left here. And then for the padding, let's do 50 on the top, 0, 0, and then 30 pixels on the left, just to push it down and out. Okay, and then the paragraph, let's see, let's say Xbox paragraph, and I'm going to set a margin of 10, let's do 10, 0, 20, just to kind of break this up a little bit. And then that should be it. Yeah. So the next thing, let's see, what's after that? So we have another set of cards after that. And what's nice is we can use the same classes and same styling. So I'm going to go back into our HTML. And basically, we're going to have the same thing we have here with our home cards. We're going to do for home cards too, except they're going to be it's just going to be different content. So I'm going to just copy this and paste it in. So we're going to go under Xbox, under the section here, and paste it in. And notice that it's the same exact thing. The class is home cards. The only difference within the divs is the content. So different image, different text. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and if we take a look, it's pretty much already styled. We just need to separate this here. So let's go back into our CSS, and for the Xbox class, let's add a margin bottom of 40 pixels. Actually, let's do 20 pixels. There. So that's all styled. After that, we have this area, which I'm just calling carbon because it's committing to carbon negative. So that's going to have a class of carbon. So we'll go under the home cards too. And let's put a comment here, say carbon. Did I add a comment for? Yeah, I did. Okay, so for this here, let's say section, give it a class of carbon, and then we'll have a class of content. So it's kind of like what we did with the Xbox, and we'll have an H2. We'll say committing to carbon negative, and then a paragraph, which I'm going to grab the text for. And then under that we'll have an 8. It's actually, we'll just copy. We'll copy this right here, this join now, and put that here, except it's going to say learn more. And I don't know why this is going to an A tag. That should be a number sign. All right. So if I save that, let's take a look. Okay, so that's what it looks like now. Let's style it. So we'll jump into our style sheet here, and we'll just make this smaller. Okay, say this is the carbon section. Okay, so for this, for carbon, we're going to set the height to 350. So it's basically just like the Xbox one, height and width of 100, 100%. And then a background image. So this is image / carbon.jpg. No repeat. Center, and cover. Okay. And by the way, this is the background repeat property. This is the background position. This is the background size. Now, as far as the content inside, let's style that. So let's say carbon, and we have our content, which wraps around the H2, the paragraph, and the link. And I'm going to set the width of this to 55%. Okay, and then to position it, let's do padding 100 pixels from the top. Okay, so we'll do 100 pixels top and then 30 on the left, and that will position it. Now, as far as the colors here, I want to change the color of the text and the button. So I think what I'm going to do is put a class, a utility class on the carbon section right here called dark, meaning that it's a dark background, so we need light text and a light button. So back in our style sheet, I'm going to put this up at the top because it's basically like a utility, kind of like the button class. So we'll say dot dark. So if it has a class of dark, then we want the color to be light because it means it has a dark background. So the color is going to be white. And then, let's see, in addition to that, we want to set the button. So we'll say if it's dark and then there's a button inside of it, then that button background we want to be light, so I'm going to use F4 3 times, which is a light gray, and then the color of the text I'll set to a dark color, so 333. Now if I save that, this is light here. We want to separate this stuff out a bit, just like we did with Xbox. So I think what we can do is go to where we have our Xbox paragraph, and let's just also add in here our carbon paragraph and save, and now that will add this margin here to this as well. And then I'm pretty sure that's all we need to do as far as the carbon area goes. So next we have this, which is this follow or social area. So let's go back to our HTML and let's go under the section here, and this is going to be the what are we going to call this? Let's call this follow. So put a comment here, we'll put a section with a class of follow, and we'll have a paragraph that says follow Microsoft, and then we're going to have some links, and then these links are, I'm just going to have them go to like the social media sites, so https facebook.com. And then inside the link here, we're going to have the Facebook icon. No, well, not icon, it's actually an image. You could use Font Awesome icons, but I'm just using images. So let's put an image tag, and let's have this go to img slash, and this is going to be social FB. Okay, and then for the alt, we'll just say Facebook. And then we're going to do the same for Twitter and LinkedIn. So I'll just copy this A tag down twice. So this one will be Twitter. And then let's do social dash Twitter for the image. Oops. Change that to Twitter. And then this will be LinkedIn. And let's see, social dash LinkedIn. And this will be LinkedIn. Okay, so we'll save that. And you can see the image here and the follow Microsoft. So we want to style this a little bit. We want the follow Microsoft to be in line with the rest of these. So let's use Flex for that. So in our CSS, under carbon, let's do our follow styles. So we'll take follow and let's display flex, and as soon as I save that, it's going to turn it into a flex row, which is what we want. But we want to align the items to the center. So if I do that, you can see now the paragraph is in the middle here. Let's also do a justify content flex start, which will make sure it's aligned at the beginning. And then for the margin, we're going to do 30 pixels top. Let's do 0, 30 pixels, and save. And now, yeah, that looks good. We do need to push. We need some spacing in between all this. So what I'm going to do is take the follow class and say everything within it. So we'll use an asterisk here, and just give it a margin right of let's do 10 pixels. Save, and now it's going to space this stuff out for us. Okay, so that's good. Next, we have these two areas. Now, this is basically a one big footer. However, I'm calling this right here with the ULs links. So this will have a class of links, this whole thing, and then this will be the footer, this part here. So let's go to our HTML and we'll just add both of those at once. All right, so under this section here, let's say links. And this is going to be a section, and give it a class of links. And then we want to have a links inner. And the reason I'm doing this is because there is going to be basically a container that stops the content here and here. However, I want the background color to extend all the way out. So we don't want to actually, you know what, one thing I did wrong is I still have it in the container. You can see this is the ending of the container, and I don't want that because then the background color would end here, and I want it to extend all the way out. So for that, then I want this div, the container div, to end here after follow. I don't want it to go around the links here. So we're going to have a class in here called links-inner, and then we'll have all of our ULs. So I'm going to just paste these in. So each unordered list is just going to be, have LIs. The first one is going to be the title, so it's going to be an H3, and then the rest will just be links. So we have that one, and then I'll just grab the rest here. Again, you can copy this from the code if you don't want to type all this crap out. Okay, so I paste in all the ULs. And like I said, we're just going to do the footer too. So underneath this section, let's say footer, and we're going to use the HTML5 footer tag for this, and we'll give it a class of, let's do main-footer. And in here is going to be this part. So we're going to have, again, it's going to extend all the way out, so we don't want it to be in the container. And we do want to put a limit on how far it goes out. Like this content, we don't want to keep going out here, so we're going to set an inner class here as well. So let's say footer-inner. Actually, we'll just call this class footer. So we have footer and footer inner. And we'll have a div. So this div is going to be this right here, this little icon, the globe icon with the English. So let's put an I tag with FAS, and let's do FA-globe. And then with Font Awesome, you can make icons bigger with FA-2x, 3x, 4x. We're going to do 2x. So that'll give us the globe icon. And then next to it, we're going to say English, and then in parentheses, United States. Okay, and then under that div will be a UL, and this is going to have all the other links, which I'm just going to grab real quick. Oops, paste those in here. Okay, so we have just a bunch of links, and then at the bottom we just have this HTML entity for the copyright symbol, excuse me, and then Microsoft 2020. So that should do it for the HTML. So if we take a look at it, it doesn't look very good. So we have quite a bit of styling to do here. So let's jump into Style CSS and go underneath our follow, and let's start with links. Okay, so first thing we're going to do here for links is set the background. And we want the background to be a gray, which is, we're going to do F2 3 times. And then the color of the text is going to be a little lighter than black. It's going to be 6-1 3 times. Okay, so if I save that, you can see now we have the gray background, the lighter text. We're going to set the font size to be smaller as well. Let's do 12 pixels. And then overall padding for the links section is going to be 35 on the top and bottom. Okay, so if I save that, that's what it's going to look like. Now for the links inner, I want that to be a grid. Okay, so if we look at this, links inner, if we set this to display grid, every direct child will be a grid item, and every direct child is a UL, right? Because we want the ULs to be aligned in grid columns. So let's set links inner. Actually, before we even do the grid stuff, let's set a max width, because again, we don't want the content to go all the way out. We want it to have a max width of the same number as the container above, which is 1100 pixels. And we want it to be aligned in the middle, so let's do margin 0 on the top and bottom, auto on the left and right to make sure it's in the middle. And just add a padding of 20 pixels on the left and right. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and display grid, and we could probably, let's make this smaller. All right, so if I display grid, I'm going to save this, and it's not going to do anything because, again, we need to set our grid template columns, and we want to have 6. There's 6 ULs, so we want to do repeat 6 times 1 fraction, or 1 FR. Make this a little bigger. Okay, so once I save this, now they're going to align in a grid, which is what we want. And then for the grid gap, which is the space in between, we'll do 10 pixels like that. Let's go ahead and align the items to flex start. And then let's set the justify content to center. All right, so you can see that they kind of just extend in and out. When we hit a certain point, like 700, we're going to change the grid template columns, but on large screens, that looks fine. Like I said, we'll do the media queries after. So let's see, these are too close together, these list items. So let's take links li, and let's really spread out the line height to say 2.8, like that. And then let's set the color of the, actually that should be fine, right? Yeah, we'll keep that as is. All right, so I think that's good for now until we get to the media queries. Now let's do this footer part down here. So we have a class of footer, and I want the background. Background is going to be the same gray, which is F2, and color, same color as the links. Okay, good. Font size 12 pixels, and padding 20 on the top and bottom. Good. And then we also have a footer inner. So let's say footer dash inner, and we're going to set, just like the links, we're going to set the max width to 1100, and the margin to 0 auto, which will put it in the middle. Padding, let's do 0, 20, 0, 20, and I'm going to display as flex. Now this footer inner only has 2 inner elements, which is the div and the UL. So the UL, we're also going to want to display this as flex so that these list items will show in a row. Let's see, so we want to align items center, and let's justify the content to the space between. So any remaining space will go in between the 2 elements here, and they're also aligned center. Now let's do the UL. So we have our links. We'll say links UL, not links, footer UL, and we want to display as flex. Okay, so that'll put them all in a row. Now when this gets smaller, I actually want it to wrap. I want these to go on top of each other, so we can use a property called flex wrap and set that to wrap and save, and now they'll just kind of go on top of each other and they don't go out of the screen. It doesn't look great, but I mean it's you can see all the links and it doesn't go off the screen, and it's workable, and it's what the actual Microsoft site does. So let's see, this looks horrible, so let's do the list items. Footer list item. Let's set margin right to 30 pixels, and we'll do a margin. I'm going to set margin bottom 20 on both the LIs and on the div, which I haven't added yet. So let's say footer div. So the footer div is this right here. And notice, actually, let me just do this first. So I'll save. Now I'm just going to stretch this out. Just show you something. So notice that this is not aligned with this. It's pushed down more. To fix that, I'm going to set that div right here, the footer div, to display flex, and then also just set align items center, which will put it right in the center along with the rest of these. All right, let's just leave this like that for now. All right, so let's see, what else do we have to do here? I think that's really it. Oh, let's push this out. See how this icon is like right on top of the word English? So we'll take, let's see, right here we'll say footer div icon, and just add a margin right of, let's do 10 pixels. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. I mean, this looks decent on full screen. Now, if we go down to 700, 500 pixels, 600 pixels, it doesn't look very good. So we do have some stuff to do here. We have some media queries to write. So the last thing I'm going to do is the menu, the little hamburger and stuff like that. So I want to put it to like between 600 and 700 pixels. We'll try it right there. And then we'll go ahead and add our media queries. So let's go down to the very bottom. And we're going to have two media queries. One is going to be for screens that are 700 pixels and below, and one will be for screens that are 500 pixels and below. So let's say at media and set a max width of 700 pixels. So any styles we put in here will only be in effect if the screen is 700 pixels or smaller. So let's start off with the cards, the home cards, which is going to be pretty easy because right now we have, if we go back up here to where we have the home cards, we have display grid, and then our grid template columns, we have 4 columns, right? You can see right here, 4 columns. I want to change it to 2 on 700 pixels and below. So I'm going to just take this grid template columns and put that right in here and just change this to 2 1FR. So if I save that, now anything below 700 pixels, we're going to get 2 columns for home cards, and that's going to do the same thing down here. All right, so home cards is pretty much taken care of. I do want just 1 when it's on 500 pixels or less, but we'll do that in a minute. Let's just get this set up first. This is basically like a tablet view. So the Xbox, this doesn't look too good. I think the only thing I want to change here is make it so that there's no paragraph. So it's just Xbox Game Ultimate and then the button. So that's really easy. We can just set the Xbox, say Xbox content paragraph, and set that to display none. Okay, now that still doesn't look too good just because the button is so close to the text. So let's also take the Xbox content H2 and let's add a margin bottom of 20 pixels. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Now let's see, down here we have kind of the same issue going on with this carbon. Instead of taking away the paragraph, though, I'm just going to make this content stretch out further. Okay, I didn't want to do that here because we won't be able to read the text just the way this background image is. And you could handle this many different ways. You could switch out the image. You can change images based on screen size if you want. But I'm going to go ahead and set the carbon content, which I believe is 55% width. I'm going to set it to 85 on smaller screens. So it looks like that. Okay, and then let's go down here. The links, I'm going to change the arrangement of columns here as well. So let's say links, and then we have links inner, which is where the grid is. That's where we did display grid. And again, we'll just take the grid template columns, and let's repeat. Instead of having 6, let's do 2 1FRs, like that. Okay, and then for the, actually I think that's it. Because this, I'm just going to leave that footer because it wraps. But yeah, that should be good for 700. Now if we go smaller, I want things to change up a little bit more. For instance, the home cards, I then want to only have 1 column. So let's add another media query below this one. So we'll go right here and say at media max width 500 pixels. Okay, and then let's just take this, put that in here, and all we need now, we don't need any repeats because we're just using 1 fractional unit. And there we go. So now all the cards are just 1 column. As far as the links go, I think I only want to have these in 1 column. That's what the actual Microsoft site does as well. So let's take this, that here, and same thing, change this to 1FR. And if we take a look now, good. I do want to add a little bit of space between all the ULs. So let's take links in our UL and just set a margin bottom to 20 pixels. Yeah, so I think that looks pretty good. Looks decent. Now we can start to work on the menu. So to work on the menu, I'm going to make this a little bigger, like that. Now for the menu button, we need to create that, because if we go to the finished product, you can see we have this little button here, and we click that and the menu opens. So first thing we'll do is create that button, because we don't even have that in our HTML right now. So I'm going to go up to the top here, and the button is going to be positioned absolute. So I'm going to put it at the very top in the body, even above the container. And it's just going to be a div with the class of menu-btn. And inside here we'll have an icon with a class of FAS and then FA-bars. And we want to make it a little bigger, so FA-2x, like that. So if I save that, it's just going to be put into the regular flow of the page, which we don't want. We want to take it out by positioning it absolute. So let's go to our style CSS and let's set, we'll put this at the top here. We'll just we'll go right above button and say menu-btn. And let's set, first of all, cursor to pointer. So when we hover over it, we get a pointer. And then we want to position this absolute. So if I do that, you can see now it's taken out of the flow of everything else, and it's just positioned absolute in the top corner here. Now as far as the positioning, I'll say from the top, let's move it down a little. So we'll say from the top we want to do 20 pixels, and then from the right, because we actually want it on the right side, we'll set it 30 pixels from the right, like that. And then I'm just going to set a z-index so that it's always on top. We'll set that to 2. Now, we obviously don't want this displayed on, when it's a large screen and we can actually see the menu items. So we're going to set the display on this to none. And then we want it to show when we hit a certain point, when we hit the 700. So let's go down to our media query, this right here, and we'll just put all this stuff at the top here. So now our menu button, we want to set from display none to, let's say, display block. And now it shows because we're at 700 or lower. If I go up more, you can see it appears and reappears depending on the screen size. So when we're at this size, 700 or less, we don't want the main menu to show at least like this. We want it to show like this if this is clicked, basically if we put a class of show on it. So let's start to style this, which is the main menu. So we're going to go down here and say, actually one thing I want to do is when I hover over this button here, I just want it to fade a little bit. So let's just quickly just add menu button hover and just set opacity to 0.5. So that way we just get a little hover effect. Now for the main menu, let's say dot, main nav, and then we have a UL with the class of main menu. So we have quite a few styles to do here. We basically need to turn it from this into this. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is set the display to block, because I believe it's flex by default. Okay, and then we're going to position this absolute, so basically take it out of the relative flow, position it absolute, which is going to put it over there, and then set it to top 0, left 0. And remember, it's still within the container. That's why it's not all the way over to the left, but we're going to fix that with the translate X property. So let's set the width. Well, actually, let's do the background first, just so we can kind of see where it begins and ends. So background is going to be gray, so it's F2 3 times. And let's set the width of this to 50%. So if I save that, it's going to be 50% width, and the height I want to be the entire thing, so 100%. All right, so far so good. Let's see, we want, I'm trying to think here, we don't want this little space right here, so we can fix that with transform and then set the translate X, so the X axis, which is horizontal axis, we want to push it, bring it over to the left, so we have to do a negative value, and we're going to do negative 20 pixels. So that will clear that little space there. Now the next thing I want to do is add a border. So we're going to have, let's say, border on the right of CCC 1 pixel solid. Okay, just give it a little border. I want it to be a little bit see-through, so I'm going to set the opacity from 1 to 0.9, which will give it that see-through look. Let's see, and then padding. So all around padding of 30 pixels, which pushes everything in. I think that's all I want to do for now. Now initially this is going to be off screen, and I'm not going to set like display none or anything. I'm going to basically push it over here off the screen, and we can do that with the translate X. So I wanted to just do this to show you guys so I could actually style it and you could see it, but initially this is going to be set to negative 500 where it's off the screen. And then what's going to happen is if we have a class of show, so I'm just going to go down here and set this main nav ul dot main menu, and if it has a class of show, then we're going to have a display like we just had it. So I'm just going to paste that in and put this to -20. And what's going to happen when we click this button here, it's going to toggle that class of show, which will bring it from translate x5 -500, which is over here, to -20, which will bring it to where it just was. So what I'm going to do is just physically or just hard code that show class onto it in the HTML for now so we can see it like that. But I'll remove that after, and then we'll just add the functionality to click the button. But we'll do that just so we can see it, so we can finish styling it, because these links don't look too good. So we're going to grab, let's take this, and let's do the LI, or LIs, and just add a padding of 10 pixels, and then let's do a border bottom of CCC solid 1 pixel, and let's make the font size a little bigger too. Let's try 14. Yeah. Now if you don't want this bottom border, because it doesn't really make sense to have that, we can just take this here and we can use a pseudo selector of last child, which is just going to take the last list item and set the border bottom to 0. Save that, and now we don't have that bottom border anymore. Now the last thing we want to do in our CSS is see these little icons here. The button is covering it, so I want to push those over a little, which is very simple. So we'll just go up here, and that has I believe it has a class of right menu, so we'll say main nav ul dot right menu, and set a margin right of 50 pixels and save, and now it just pushes that over. Okay, and if I make this bigger, you can see everything, it just goes back to normal. So now we need to remove this show class from the HTML because we want to add that dynamically with JavaScript. So we'll go down to the bottom, all the way down, and from here go right above the body tag and just add in a script tag here. So we want to select this button here, which has a class of menu BTN. So let's say document, we're going to use a document object, and then use query selector. Okay, so this will select anything in the DOM, and we're going to take the element with the class of menu-btn. And then we want to add an event listener. So we'll call .add event listener, and this will take in the event we want to listen for, which is a click, and it also takes in a function. I'm just going to use an arrow function here. And all we want to happen now is to add that show class to the main menu. So we'll select the main menu, document dot, we'll use query selector here again, and we'll take the class of main menu, and we're going to say dot class list. I know this is scrunched up, but we're going to take class list, which is the property which has all of its classes, and then there's methods we can use like add, remove, and toggle. We want to toggle the class of show. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. When we hit the menu button, which is this, we want to listen for a click. Okay, so as soon as we click it, it'll run this function. It'll select the main menu, which is that whole menu that we just styled, that's not showing right now because it's off the screen, and it'll add the class of show. And as soon as that happens, when that show class is added, it goes from translate x -500, which pushes it off the screen, to -20 pixels, which puts it in that position where it shows. So I'm going to just go ahead and reload, and I'm going to hit that, and now it shows. So one thing that I actually forgot to do in the CSS was add a transition, because I don't want it to just pop up like that. I want it to transition into it slowly so it gives it that slide effect. So in our CSS, we just need to add one line to this this main menu right here. So right under the transform, let's add a transition, and it needs to know what property do we want to add the transition on, and that's going to be the transform. Okay, because the transform is what changes this translate X value. And then the time it takes, let's say 0.5 seconds, and then the effect, which we'll use ease in out. So now, if I go ahead and I click this, now it slides in. It has a transition. Okay, so it has kind of this animation instead of just popping in, which makes it look much nicer. All right, so that's it. So this is what it looks like full screen, which looks pretty good. And then we get down to 700 pixels, and the menu goes away up here. This gets pushed over, this appears, and then we can go ahead and open the menu. And then if it's even smaller, you know, these all stack up, so these are all one column, and the menu still works. So it comes out to 50% regardless of the size of the screen. So that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this little project here and you learned a little bit more about CSS or even HTML. But that's it. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.